Welcome to Measured Thoughts. I'm Dave Reepstein, and my guest on this episode is Nina Goodheart, Vice President of Marketing at Medtronic. For those not familiar with the company, Medtronic was founded in 1949. Since then, they've grown into a multinational company that does business in more than 120 countries. A leader in medical technology, Medtronic helps patients with chronic conditions by alleviating pain, restoring health, and improving the quality of life. Headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Medtronic employs over 35,000 people around the world. Now, let's meet Nina Goodheart. Nina, let's start off and tell me about Medtronic.
Medtronic is the world's largest medical technology device company. We have 6 divisions. We're in most of the major chronic diseases, neurology, diabetes. The division that we're talking about is cardiac rhythm disease management, or CRDM, as we affectionately call it, where we create and make pacemakers and defibrillators for cardiac disease.
And that's the division that you're in charge of marketing for.
Correct. So if you think about Medtronic, it's about an $11 billion company. About half of that is in the CRDM space. And so we are the flagship division of Medtronic and the largest division.
Is there somebody in charge of marketing corporate-wide, or does each of the divisions have their own marketing vice president?
No, it's interesting. We don't have a chief marketing officer, so each of the divisions operate pretty much as a separate company, and they each have a vice president of marketing.
And you're the vice president of the largest division of the company?
Correct.
And tell me about some of your background.
I have an interesting background for this. My background is primarily in consumer packaged goods marketing, in advertising and consulting. So this is the first time I've been on what we call the client side or the manufacturing side of this business.
How did you make that transition from consumer packaged goods to medical devices?
It's been a journey. So I started on the packaged goods side. I started to transition to pharma, and then to direct to consumer, and then to medical devices.
Okay. And how long have you been at Medtronic?
I've been here just about 3 years.
Transition fairly easy?
Yeah, very different. So in the consulting world, where we have so much freedom and we are very broad instead of very deep, this has been a little bit of the opposite. I go very, very deep here, which has been fascinating.
So I've got to believe that the role of marketing is significantly different at a medical devices company versus at consumer packaged goods.
Without question.
So what's the role of marketing at Medtronic?
It's probably similar to packaged goods in that, from my perspective, the role of marketing is really to act as the voice of the customer. So what we do for the organization is provide all of the customer insights, all of the customer research, all of the customer dynamics, so that we can help the organization determine what kinds of technology we should bring to the market.
I have the understanding of what a customer is when I'm talking about selling toothpaste.
It's a great question.
Talk to us for a moment about when you say the voice of the customer. Who's the customer?
The customer has been changing. So unlike consumer marketing, where the customer is the consumer, the customer for us is primarily physicians. And in our case, they're primarily specialists. So for Medtronic and for CRDM, our customer are cardiologists or electrophysiologists, so really sub-specialists in the medical community.
So when you think about the patient, the patient is the ultimate receiver of the device.
Correct.
But most of your marketing effort is directed towards the physician.
Right. So unlike in other businesses where the end user or the end beneficiary makes the decision, in our case, the patient doesn't make the decision at all. It's really a decision made by the physician.
And when you say you're in charge of sort of the voice of the customer, the majority of your work is sort of communicating inward what the customer is saying? Or is it sort of split between communicating inward about what it is that is needed and what we need to be working on versus communicating outward to the physicians?
It's both. It's absolutely both. So a lot of what we do is understanding what our customers need, what kind of technology they're looking for, where the market is going, what patients are going to need 5 years, 10 years from now in the medical technology space so that we can translate that into solutions. We also communicate that information out. And so part of what we do is communicate and educate physicians on what these devices do, the capabilities that they have, what they'll be doing in the future, and what they can look forward to.
So most of your outward role is in terms of educating the physicians.
Educating physicians on the therapies, educating physicians on the devices, absolutely.
And I presume that if I was talking today to the CEO, he would say the role of marketing is also to communicate outward as well as for us to better understand. And it would be totally consistent with what it is that you would say.
I think it would be at this point totally consistent.
And your CFO?
Always an interesting tension between marketing and finance, although I think from our perspective, we've gotten a lot closer. And so a number of years ago, I think there may have been a wide gap in terms of how we both defined what marketing is. I think now, given the analytics that we're using, the evidence behind the analytics, he is much, much more comfortable with what we do.
And I assume there's a separate division of sales.
Yes.
And there's a vice president in charge of sales.
Correct.
And how do you try and coordinate your efforts with the vice president of sales?
We are pretty well aligned. You know, we set corporate objectives very early in our strategic planning process. We are both charged with growing share. We're both charged with growing what we call initial implants or market penetration. And we've worked very closely to align our efforts to meet those objectives.
And you said we jointly set objectives. Mm-hmm. Those objectives are sales and market share
Correct.
Objectives?
Correct.
And profit objectives?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you're responsible for delivering on all three dimensions, I presume?
Without question.
Okay. Now that we have some understanding of the business, tell me a little bit about how you go about determining your marketing budget.
It's always an interesting process and a lengthy process. We start with a strategic plan. So the corporation sets a 5-year strategic plan. We then get that in our business unit, and we develop a 5-year strategic plan for the business unit. Once we've agreed on the strategic objectives for the business, we then align a marketing plan to that.
And who's the we when you say that?
I say we because it's a team effort. So I have a marketing organization. All of the functions work together. So sales, marketing, R&D, finance, quality, clinical. We're all working towards the same key objectives so that we can keep everything in alignment.
And so when you figure out how much to spend, we've got these certain objectives. What's it going to take for us to achieve these particular objectives?
Right.
And that's what helps determine.
So it's essentially bottoms up and tops down. So we look at what we forecast our revenue is what that's going to look like. We look at what our bottom line needs to be. We then have the dollars in the middle that need to be allocated to all of the functions. How much will we spend in marketing? How much will we spend in clinical trials? How much will we spend in R&D, et cetera?
Is there a fairly good understanding of what you get in response to how much you spend? So we've got these objectives, therefore we need to spend, and we have a certain understanding of if I spend this much, I'll achieve these objectives.
I think it's part art, part science, as marketing, I think, always is. I think it's easier to do in some of the other functions. So we know in R&D, if we create this product, we can forecast, we think we'll get this amount of return on investment. If we hire this many salespeople and they can make this many calls, we can anticipate what we think that they'll generate. It's not quite as easy in marketing.
Right.
And so that's always a little bit softer, which is hard for an organization like ours.
I'm curious, when we think about budgets, how 2009 affected you. So lots of markets were affected significantly. Right. Medical, I've got to presume, people still have health issues regardless of what's going on in the economy.
Correct.
So how did the economic downturn of 2009 affect your business?
It doesn't affect incidence and prevalence, so you're exactly right. If people need an implantable device, they need an implantable device regardless of what the economic situation is. Where it did affect us is on the hospital economic buying part. So where we used to have hospitals willing to buy premium products at very high prices, they're now no longer as willing to do that. and they're having more and more influence in the buying decision.
Dan. So that means margins are being squeezed.
Margins are absolutely being squeezed.
So as margins were being squeezed, how did that affect your budgets in 2009 for marketing?
They did not go up. They clearly came down. Like most companies, we're learning to do more with less.
And the same for your competition?
Yes.
So in terms of relative spend to your competition, was it roughly the same, or were you less aggressive in reductions?
It's always hard to tell. So we're in an industry where we see ebbs and flows. I would say that we all took a little bit of a hit. It's just a matter of where we took the hit. So we have one competitor that may have taken a hit more on the sales force. Another competitor may have taken a little bit more of a hit on the marketing side. I think it depends on how each individual company decided to deal with the economic downturn.
So when I think about your marketing budget, what are the major components of that budget that you spend on?
Customer education is a huge component. We spend a lot of money training our customers, training physicians on the therapies, on the products, how to use them. We do a lot of hands-on training, and we do that around the world. We bring physicians to the United States to learn how to use these products, and then they go back and practice in their own countries. We spend a significant amount of money funding fellowships in hospitals in the cardiac space. We spend a very large amount of money on supporting medical societies, the American Heart Association, the Association of Clinical Cardiology, the Heart Rhythm Society, etc. So all of those take significant amounts of money. We also spend a huge amount, a very large amount, supporting our sales force. We have a very, very highly trained sales force, and they need materials to be able to educate and communicate with their customers.
So if I had to think about objectives or metrics that you might use for trying to assess those spendings,
right?
What sort of metrics would that be?
The metrics are a little interesting in our space because we're regulated, and there is a lot we cannot measure. So we can't determine that we've spent X amount of dollars educating that specific customer, that specific physician, and because of that, they have implanted X amount of our devices. So from a regulatory perspective, that just doesn't work. So we look at it on a broader, more national perspective.
So you just got done naming the several items that you spend on.
Right.
How do you decide how much to spend on which?
Well, we take a look at where we think we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. What's going to give us the biggest return on our investment? Is
it very difficult for you to determine what kind of return you do get on that investment?
Well, there's a lot we can't measure given the regulatory environment. But really, the goals that we have in marketing are pretty simple. We want to increase brand awareness. We operate under a master brand strategy, so we really want to increase the equity of the Medtronic brand. We want to educate our customers. We want to make them aware of our products and increase that brand awareness. And so we have a good feeling that we're doing those things.
And that allows you to assess, because you referred to the return on investment, that allows you to assess the return that you're getting on each of these investments?
I think that we get a good sense of which things give us the greatest return. We still may spend on things that give us a lesser return if we think they're the right things to do.
Okay. So I'm sort of curious about then the measurement with all of this. And so what I've heard you say is you measure awareness. I presume that you also measure sort of not just brand awareness, but then awareness of what your capabilities are, what your product capabilities are relative to other options that customers have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how often do you go out and measure awareness?
Probably not as often as we should, but more often than we used to. So some of that is dictated by budget. Some of it is dictated by what kinds of things that we're looking at. We've made some huge investments for us, large investments in market research over the last couple of years. So our market research has gotten much more sophisticated than it has in prior years. We're looking at things like customer engagement, brand awareness, brand equity. We're looking at brand loyalty. We're looking at we do more modeling than we used to. So it's a journey, but we're definitely making progress.
So as I hear customer engagement, brand awareness, brand loyalty, those are things that don't return short term. Those are things that have both a short term and a longer term.
Absolutely.
So do you try and assess, wow, if I increase my brand loyalty, here's the impact it has today, and here's how it has an impact over the long run?
That's absolutely the goal. We're a publicly traded company, and we're measured quarter by quarter. So it is always harder to spend on the things that give us a longer term return than it is on the things that give us a shorter return. But the goal is to do both.
And do you measure the impact of your brand? So you said we're trying to create this brand equity. Do you measure your brand equity?
We do. We've done a number of studies. We've done a number of interviews. We try and understand what our brand means to our customers, the value that it brings. We're very comfortable that it's an incredibly strong and clean brand. I think it's a very enviable brand. We want to make sure that we maintain that.
And what I have found is different companies do it in various different ways. So some companies say, I want to come up with a number. Here's what my brand's value is. And others say, I want to come up with dimensions of my brand.
Right.
Do you do both?
We probably, I think we're still seeking and searching for the right way to do it. I'm not a huge believer in the number, in the score. I just think it's multifactorial. I'm not sure that gives us exactly what we need. I'm not sure we found the perfect way to do it, but we're doing it better than we used to. And I think that's a great thing.
Okay. Brand's one of the dimensions. Awareness, obviously, is a component of that. You mentioned customer engagement. What's part of that?
One of the things we look at is how do customers engage in our brand? What is, and maybe it's semantics, but we're looking at how do they interact with the company? How do they interact with the features on the devices? How often will they choose our device, this device, versus a competitive device, and why?
And do you look at, what are the other major sort of measures that you look at to assess the sort of success of your marketing efforts?
Give me a sense of what you mean.
Well, brand would be one. Awareness would be another. But things like lifetime value of the customer. Is that something you look at?
We're just starting to. We have never done it traditionally. When you think about a company like Medtronic, essentially it was a very sophisticated electrical engineering company. And what we did is we built devices and we sold them. We built them and we sold them. As this market has gotten more sophisticated and as it's gotten more competitive, we're starting to do much more of what you're talking about, but we're really in the beginning stages.
So I'm going to throw one more out there and see if you measure it. Share of wallet or share of requirements. It's a term you became very familiar with when you were in the consumer goods side.
Right.
Do you look at that at all now?
We have not really. We have not.
Yeah, you could imagine looking at a physician and saying, for so many pacemakers that they install, how many of them happen to be ours?
Right.
So it might be something that you could be looking at.
Absolutely.
Okay. Before I go too far away from it, we're looking at the Obama healthcare program.
Yes, we are.
How is that going to affect you?
We think it's going to have great impact. So if we think about medical devices, part of the healthcare reform wants to put a sizable tax on medical devices. It would make us amongst the most highly taxed industries in the country. We think that will have a huge negative impact on innovation. So much of that money that we'll now be paying in taxes really funds our R&D budget. So we're very concerned about things like that. We're concerned about cuts in reimbursement for physicians, whether or not these will be industries and engagements that physicians will want to continue to have. We're hearing a lot of feedback on that as well.
So I presume you have a bunch of contingency plans that you've worked on in case this
We're watching it very, very closely.
And how will that affect your marketing budget?
I think it depends on what happens. One of the things that we're seeing is, as I mentioned before, this increase in economic buyer influence. What we're seeing in the U.S. are more and more physician practices being sold to hospitals. And so hospitals are looking much more closely at finances, much more so than private practice. And so as we see premium prices coming down, much more cost consciousness on the side of the buyer, I think we'll see some pressure on budgets across the board.
My sense is that the company, from what it is that I've been able to learn about the company, is that you have been ever increasing in your use of more sophisticated marketing and marketing analytics.
Correct.
How has that change been progressing, and what sort of things are you focusing on these days?
We are absolutely driving towards what we call evidence-based marketing. How do we use data to guide facts? One of the things that we're stressing is that the data shouldn't make the decision for us, but it should definitely give us enough information so that we're making better informed decisions. And so we're looking at much more sophisticated financial modeling, share modeling, mix modeling, marketing modeling to help us make better decisions.
And how is marketing research changing within your job?
Well, if I think back a couple of years, when I think about the kinds of research we used to do in this industry, we do things called advisory boards, where we bring 5, 10, 15 key thought leaders into a room, and we bounce a number of ideas off of them. Essentially, we used to stop there, and we would take that as gospel and guidance, and based on that feedback, we would make decisions, and we would make very, very large decisions. The kinds of marketing programs that we were going to run, the kind of products we were going to develop. What we're learning is that those physicians are an elite set. They may not speak for the community at large. So now what we do is we use those to build our hypothesis. Then we go out and do qualitative and quantitative research, and we're finding we're getting very different decisions, much better decisions.
So with the data, your fact-based marketing has changed. There are some times when you don't have data.
Yes.
How do you operate under those circumstances?
We work in an industry where we know our customers fairly well. We know the market very well. We understand the dynamics in the market, both in the U.S. and globally. And so we get as much information as we can, and then we use intuition. We use our understanding and knowledge of the market to make those decisions.
Do you have a sort of systematic way of trying to, embed intuition? Or is it, use your judgment and make some decisions here?
I'd love to say it was very process-oriented, but it's a little bit more of a gut check.
One of the big things that's happened in the industry is the advent of recalls.
Yes.
We often hear about recalls in the automotive industry, but it happens in medical devices as well. How's that impacted your business, and how's it affect what you do in marketing?
Recalls have been a huge part of the medical device industry over the last number of years. Unfortunately, we've seen more than we would all like to have seen in the last couple of years as well. In terms of how they affect what we do, I think they've had a huge impact on the customer base, and I'm talking about all customer bases. Patients are aware, physicians are aware, hospital administrators are aware. One of the results of that is that physicians have been dividing loyalty, so whereby they may have once been an 80% share customer for a particular company, for Medtronic, for instance. They may now decide to mitigate their risk, in their mind mitigate their risk, and split their business a little bit more evenly. What that's meant for marketing is that we have to be even more diligent about proving the worth of our devices, proving the differentiation that our devices offer, so that they truly understand the value and the difference of one device from another.
I want to get a sense now of, as you measure things and sort of track the progress that you're making, are there a set of measures that you regularly share throughout the organization, and what's your process for sort of sharing that too?
So we build a number of dashboards, if you will, that show the metrics. We take a look at what our revenue is, what our share is, what our mix is. We do that at the national, at the regional, and the local level, so that we can drill down to a particular sales rep to see what's happening in a market, on a feature, on a particular product, so that we have a very good sense of what's happening where and why.
You have it down to this specific salesperson?
We can get it down to the salesperson.
And when you say mix, it's the mix of products?
Correct.
And everybody has access to that information, or is it relatively?
We share it among senior staff.
Right.
So the senior staff looks at it. We make sure that the sales management team has access to that, so that they can go into a particular district or a particular region, understand what's happening, why are they being particularly successful, so we can share that success, or why are they being challenged, so we can help them.
Compensation based on performance in those dimensions?
Absolutely.
And how often are those measures?
Every month.
Every month. Very good. If there was one thing you could improve from what it is you're currently doing, what would that be?
I'd like to have a better sense of the return on some of the marketing programs that we're doing. I'd like to have a better sense of the metrics of how we can better measure some of the initiatives that we have in place so that we can truly understand where our spending is going, how effective it is, where we should spend more, and probably where we should spend less.
Okay. Anything I haven't asked you wished I had?
I don't think so.
And what is it you enjoy most about your job?
I would say that the thing that this job offers that other marketing jobs don't is interaction with patients. Even unlike pharma, because our salespeople are in the cath labs and we know these patients, and these patients call us on a daily basis. We have a very large call center that caters to their needs. We have a terrific relationship. And there's a measurement at Medtronic that I think is unusual. We don't only measure revenue and measure share, we measure the number of patients served every quarter. And so the most important metric in the organization is watching the number of patients served.
You don't have big golden arches or anything, say number of...
We probably could, and I think people would love that.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. You've been really, really frank with us, and I appreciate that very much.
Well,
so thank you very much for joining us right now. Nina, I appreciate it very, very much. So that's all the time we have now for Measured Thoughts. We've been joined today by Nina Goodheart at Medtronic. And thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.